breakout players. You know I love them, and I think you do too. On this episode of the IDP After Show, my very special guest, Mr. Jase Abbey from the IDP Show and DLF, is joining me to help bring 10 breakout candidates we feel are going to outperform their current ADP and become some players that will become easy starts for you and your fantasy football squads this season. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, just sit back, listen in, and let's get after it on this episode of the IDP After Show.
This is the IDP After Show.
We're all looking for the next big breakout star, a player that's going to give us a massive positional advantage on our teams and hopefully help us hoist the hardware and maybe put a little cold hard cash in our pockets at the end of the season. In this episode, I get the great privilege of talking to someone who is no stranger to the IDP After Show, the brilliant, the insightful, and the very super humble Mr. Jase Abbey. Jase, thank you so much for joining me today. How have you been?
Quite the intro, Jeff. Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, my man. I've been following along. And I've got to say, you've been smashing this hosting game. I knew you would, but it makes me super happy to see it all the same.
The shoes are very big. I got on 3 extra pairs of socks just to fill them. So that's where we're at right now. So I appreciate that.
But yeah, as for me, yeah, I think like everyone, I've enjoyed the off season, the draft especially, and all that goes with it. But I'm more than ready for the season to start now. Give me some games already, you know.
Yeah, well, we got a game tomorrow night, so I guess if you call it that, so we're right on the cusp of real football. Yes. So we'll go with that. So, Jase, we're all looking for that next big breakout star, and when you hear the word breakout, a lot of times it's kind of tough to interpret exactly what you're thinking of a breakout star. To you, when you hear a breakout star, what's the criteria you use to identify a breakout player?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question, because I think everyone's definition is a little bit different from the next person over. For me, somebody that's doing better or should be doing better this year than they were the year before, if they were in the league the year before. Somebody that just outperforms expectations, or in other words, sort of outperforms their ADP. That's really at the crux of it, I think, what the definition is. But that leaves it wide open to interpretation, right? And you know, one person's breakout could be a guy that somebody else thinks has already broken out, whereas the next person could be talking about somebody who's way under the radar. So, yeah, it's a kind of a loose definition to my mind. What about you?
I'm right in line with you there, Jase, with that, because I can see a player almost being a breakout candidate in consecutive years, as long as they can keep ascending and like outperforming ADP. You know, they can continue to be a breakout star for years and years to come. And hopefully we've got a list of 10 of them here tonight for you that are going to be some slam dunks for you in your lineups this season. So without further ado, Jase, you got the honors of, we're going to go defensive tackle, defensive end, linebacker, defensive back, and then we got a bonus player that we're going to throw out at any position. So who would you like to kick off the show with, Jase?
Yeah, I'm going to kick us off with Alim McNeill, Lions DT. And I think with him, it makes sense to start with the injury, right? Because he tore his ACL in December. So it was no surprise when earlier this year, Dan Campbell said he's probably going to miss some time to start the season. But just last week, Brad Holmes had more positive news. He said he's doing great, said he could be back earlier than expected. And the fact they've added him to the active PUP list reinforces that idea. It leaves the door open for him to return from the get-go. It's obviously still a concern, but I'm not quite as worried as I was before, Jeff. In terms of who he is as a player, I think there's a lot of positives. He's grown steadily every year since entering the league 4 years ago, especially as a pass rusher. I mean, for a guy who had limited upside in that sense at NC State and who used to play almost exclusively as a nose tackle, he's really defied expectations. In the last 3 years, his pressure rates have improved from 6.9 to 9.7 to 10.3%. His win rate is up from 14.5 to 15.3 and now to 17.9%. Now, where he's come up short is not being able to convert those pressures into sacks, right? He had 45 pressures last year, only came away with 3.5 sacks. But that's exactly what makes him my breakout really here. The expectation that those sack numbers will normalize a little bit. So, yeah, when I think ahead to what he can do this year, the Lions are telling us he's healthier than we thought, and that might not be an issue. We know the talent's there. The continual development is also there. And I think even with the added competition that he's got there with Williams joining Reader and Onwuzurike, I think he's got a really good shot to pick up where he left from last year and kind of break out for us down the stretch.
I love this call too, just because, and it'll be a theme with some of my players that I'm talking about, but it's not only the player, but it's the cast that they're playing with. And that defensive line for the Detroit Lions, anytime you have a player of Aiden Hutchinson's caliber, the attention's going to be drawn. It's just going to, like, Jay Colhagen always says, a rising tide raises all ships. And I think that's the case here too. I just can see this being a really nice player, very low entry cost to acquire. And in a defensive tackle required league, I think you could do a lot worse than a player like this.
Glad to hear you're right there with me. Yeah, he's a guy that I traded away recently, which really annoyed me when I circled back to look at the points in terms of, I mentioned there, how he's continually developed every year. And yeah, it is what it is. I've got other players to take his place, but yeah, he's a breakout candidate for me for sure.
I like that call. I'm going to go ahead with my player here. This is a player I was super high on last year coming out of the draft and just hoping to hit, but then unfortunately we had to deal with, like with Alim McNeill, there's some injuries as well. Darius Robinson, like I mentioned, former first-round pick out of Missouri. Loved him coming out of college. Super excited. He had the skill set. I love the landing spot, an opportunity for a ton of snaps on a team that desperately needed a playmaker. But unfortunately, like a lot of other defensive linemen, rookie defensive linemen in Arizona, they suffer calf injuries there. So I don't know if it's dehydration or what, but he was unfortunately only able to play in 6 games last season. He did finish the end of the season seeing a consistent increase in snaps, which is something great to see, players finishing strong the season prior. He had 6 tackles and a sack in his very limited action. In 2025, it's a much improved roster. They brought in Delvin Tomlinson, Josh Sweat is there, and Calais Campbell. I love the presence of Calais Campbell that he's going to bring to the team. He's almost like a third coach on the field. Like, he's been around. He's a veteran. He's got that presence. He knows how to carry himself. He's going to teach these younger players work ethic and how to be a professional. So I just truly, truly love that. We've seen that many times with players that Campbell has played with. I also like the fact that they drafted Walter Nolan. So you're going to have all of this cast of players that are going to be much improved. And I don't think that Robinson has to be the one, but he can be a one that's going to be very influential on that line. He came into camp all yoked up. If you've seen any training camp clips of him, it looks like he's built in a lab. He's 6'5", 285. All of the reps that we've seen in camp, he's fast, he's quick, deliberate, he's moving with purpose. Head coach Jonathan Gannon has said that he's super motivated to prove himself. And in a league that I need to start a defensive tackle, or even in a league that I'm starting a defensive end, if I'm starting 4 or more defensive ends, Darius Robinson might be on the short list of players that I want to have this season. I just think that need, draft capital, and like the physical traits are all there for him to take off the season.
Yep. Yeah, you mentioned the injury, that calf. We can't read too much into, or at all really, into what happened last year. That's got to set a player back by a massive amount, hasn't it? Especially when they're a rookie. Kept him out, as you say, 12 weeks. I gather it also kind of nagged him a little bit once he got back as well. But he showed real promise in that final year in college. I understand why you're so excited about him. 14.4% pressure rate, 42 pressures, 9 sacks. And that happened after he kind of changed positions, spent a lot more time on the edge. And the Cards used him primarily as an edge guy last year. And I'm encouraged to see that during camp as well, they're using him as a DT and an edge too. So as you said, there is more competition in that defensive front this year. Tomlinson, Nolan, Sweat, Campbell, you mentioned too. But as you also said, Robinson has that first round draft capital. He was Austin Fort's pick. He's Austin Fort's guy. So now he's healthy. I am expecting him to have a much better year than last year. My only reservation, if I have any at all, is that he plays so little that it might take him a year to kind of find his feet. But it's not like year 1 was wasted altogether. He said so himself. He had time to learn the defense. So yeah, I can totally see why you've got him listed as a breakout.
Yeah, he's just a player that I was super excited coming out of college, and just unfortunate that he had that first year hiccup with the calf and stuff like that. But like you said, he used it as a learning opportunity. And like head coach came in and said, like, he's motivated to prove that why he was drafted in the first round. So I just love hearing those types of things. He's saying all the right things. He's doing all the right things. So hopefully where there's smoke, there's fire this season. So
yeah, it's interesting actually that both our first two nominations, McNeill for different reasons. McNeill for health reasons might take a little while to find his feet, and Robinson just because he's so raw and so new to the NFL, even though he, as I say, played last year but not very much and toward the end. Both of these guys might take a few games to find their feet, but that doesn't preclude them from being breakouts, I don't think.
yeah, great minds think alike, Jase. That's what I've heard. So speaking of great minds, I love this next call of yours for defensive end. I love his teammate Jase Hunt, and that was something like when creating this list of players. I know you didn't want to be redundant in players that you'd already had mentioned, and so kind of digging a little bit deeper in this for this episode, finding some players that aren't the Jase Hunt players, they aren't the Jalen Carly's players, just digging a little bit deeper to kind of some of these guys. So I'm excited to hear about your defensive end nomination here.
Yeah, I've gone with Nolan Smith, and before I talk about him, to your point, yeah, it's really isn't it tough to avoid repeating yourself with player evaluations, and especially when you're talking about what you think they're projecting them to do going into the year ahead or the next few years ahead. But yeah, like you, I kind of recognize that people don't want to hear the same names over and over. There's no edge to be had, is there, when everyone's hyping the same names, the same group of players over and over again. So yeah, I've got a couple of names here that I have talked about in previous articles or on previous shows, but yeah, I've also dug a little deeper and come up with some fresh suggestions too, as I know you have. Nolan Smith, I'm really high on him actually. I talked about him in my overlooked or forgotten article series with the IDP show. I think it was last month, maybe the month before. And I said there, what really attracts me to him as an IDP asset is what he did over the second half of the year, including the playoffs. And I know that, some of his best games came after the fantasy season had ended, but I'm sure it didn't escape IDP fans that he carried his late season form over into those playoffs. And over those last 8 games, he overtook Josh Sweat in snap share, had an excellent 15% pressure rate, and came up with 6 sacks. And for the most part, he did that against the best teams in the league, right? So his win rate also ranks in the 88th percentile amongst all edges in 2024. And I think all of this looks even more impressive when we consider that he barely played in his rookie year, was still in the, in the third in the edge rotation behind Sweat and Graham as recently as week 8, almost midway through the 2024 season. So yeah, this year with Josh Sweat walking out the door, nobody super impressive coming in to replace him. I'd be amazed if Smith didn't lead the Eagles' edges in snaps. And if he carries some of that form over to this year that we saw towards the back end of last year, I think a breakout season is really on the cards for him.
And I think it's addition by subtraction for Smith because they didn't bring in anybody in the draft. They lost Graham, like you had mentioned. Sweat is now in Arizona, and Bryce Huff is now in San Francisco. So really, the cupboard is pretty bare when it comes to talent and the defensive end room in Philadelphia. And that's why I really like Nolan Smith, and I really like Jase Hunt for this season, just to be those ascending players, and like you said, they're playing their best ball at the end of last season. Hopefully that momentum carries over. So, and Vic Fangio seems to love these two guys a lot.
For sure.
So just kind of love that call.
And I think the cupboard is a little barer by design, right? They clearly like what they had in Nolan Smith. They clearly like what they had in Hunt. They brought in I can't remember who they brought in recently. A vet who doesn't really move the needle much for me, but yeah, I think it's by design, and that says something about what they think about him too, which kind of adds to his appeal for me. So yeah.
Well, and also, when you play with Jalen Carter on the defensive line, that he's going to be a man eater there. He's going to draw some attention. And a player that you had mentioned in an article or an episode previously, Mojo Moro. I'm going to butcher his name, so I'm going to let you take that one.
Oh, Moro Ajomo, really deep DT premium.
Yeah.
If you got, he's one of those guys who, you look at the numbers, it's like, wow, okay, maybe there's something there, especially with them not entirely trusting Davis to play a significant role. I think there's something exciting about him.
Yeah. So, and again, that talented room, you're just gushing with talent, and it makes it hard for an offensive coordinator to focus in on to take a player away or scheme away from a player when you have literally first round talent all across the front line there. So that makes it really challenging. So not the last time we're going to mention the Eagles in this episode. So
no. And the point I almost forget to think about sometimes is what's the rest of that roster like? You mentioned the D line there, but when you've got people like Mitchell and DeJean back there in the secondary, and Bourne, at linebacker, who proved to be a fantastic coverage linebacker last year, it kind of gives those guys up front maybe a little bit more time. Split seconds we're probably talking about here, but that's what it takes sometimes to get after that quarterback. So yeah, just another string to the Nolan breakout bow.
And I love the fact that you mentioned that, because I often, like, I don't know if it's just me thinking into this narrative, but like doing the IDP minute episodes, talking yesterday about Travis Hunter playing defensive back for Jacksonville. And then you've got Tyson Campbell playing defensive back there. And all of a sudden that's a really dynamic duo, and if it gives those defensive linemen a split second more, those hurries become hits. And then those hits become sacks, and like a player, like you had mentioned before, like it just takes a fraction of a second to become a game-changing play, a strip sack fumble or whatever it might be, and that's the difference between a win and a loss in fantasy football weeks. So
for sure, there's an
I'm glad
article
I'm not
in
the
this.
only one speaking that into existence. So
I'm going to make a little note. You've given me a great idea for an article, Jeff. So thank you. But yes, we're
perfect.
good.
Perfect. Awesome. Good stuff. I'm going to talk about a player here that Mr. Mike Woolert really likes this year as a breakout candidate as well. His name is Isaiah McGuire for Cleveland. I don't know if he likes him because he's a player or he plays for the Browns, but either way, he's a big fan. McGuire is a third-year player, third-round pick out of Missouri. I must have a thing for Missouri players this episode, but he's shown growth every year in every single phase of his game, from rushing efficiency, tackling. He played a much bigger role last season as the season went on. He played 469 snaps in 2024, playing 60% of those snaps in the final 7 games. So again, kind of seeing this trend with these players ascending at the right time. Also in those final 7 games, he had 7 sacks to go along with 17 tackles. So again, playing his very best football at the very end. Like Robinson, love the opportunity in 2025. I love the cast that he's playing with. Anytime you get to play opposite of Myles Garrett, you're going to be in great shape. The team brought in Malik Collins. They drafted Mason Graham. Those guys are going to be bulldozers, man-eaters in the middle. And you get all these dudes going to be drawing some attention. That leaves someone open or available. And if I had to pick who I'm going to try to beat me one-on-one, it's probably going to be McGuire. It's probably not going to be Garrett. It's probably not going to be Graham. So I'm going to pick my poison and maybe, one-on-one with McGuire. I'm not sad if I'm starting McGuire in my defensive leagues that I start 4 or more defensive linemen. I love him as a depth piece, obviously, but if I have to start him at my 4th spot, I'm okay with that. Chances are he's probably going to be available because he's available. He's only rostered in 9% of sleeper leagues right now. And so there's probably a really good chance that he's probably on your waiver wires right now. And if you have a spot, I think he makes a great stash. And, he costs you nothing. For the price of a mouse click, he can be yours. So I think that right now, as we sit here at the end of July, beginning of August, I think he makes a great ad.
Yeah, you'd have to think that with no Ogbo, Okoronkwo, and Darius Smith to compete with, he's going to be in line for more snaps this year, just as he did start to earn more snaps when Smith was traded to Detroit.
Yep.
And Okoronkwo got phased out down the stretch. My uncertainty with him is whether the talent is enough to maximize those opportunities. I know he had a few standout games last year. Consistency was a bit of a problem, though. I was impressed, but I wasn't completely blown away, I think is the best way of explaining that. And that, I'm a little undecided, if I'm honest. And I'm going to kind of temper my expectations, but I will say this. He was pretty damn good those last few years at college and really took a kind of a step forward in that final year. So I think you might be onto something, Jeff. And this is one of those times where I'm on a show with someone, they'll mention somebody who wasn't entirely on my radar. I'll go away and then I'll find a reason to agree with them. So yeah, if you're proven right, and I fully expect you to do so, then I expect you to exercise full bragging rights and come at me. But I'm not saying I disagree. I'm just saying I don't know if I'm right there with him as a breakout. But going back to our definition earlier in the show, at the head of the show there, clearly in line to do better than he did last year, if for no other reason than by virtue of a lack of competition there at the edge spot. And yeah, as you say, Graham, Garrett, he's going to have a lot of one-on-ones, right?
And volume, he might just become a volume play. And like, there's no better, thing that we can chase as IDP analysts than volume. Like if you're not on the field, you can't make plays. So maybe he might be playing defensive back for the Browns here, the way they've been going through, unfortunately, their rash of injuries the last couple of days. I just saw that they just lost another one yesterday to an ACL for the season. So if you can play any defensive back, Jase, I think Cleveland or Miami might be giving you a call. So
no, I give these guys a hard time for having injuries, but I think every injury we've mentioned so far during this episode is one I'm currently dealing with. So I don't think I'd be, the best shout. Yeah.
Well, transitioning to a player who's not injured right now, let's go away from that. Who is your linebacker right now that you feel is a breakout for 2025?
Yeah, I've gone for Tyrice Knight, Seahawks linebacker. They made a lot of changes to their linebacker group in season last year. Ernest Jones, Jerome Baker swapped teams in that midseason trade. Dodson was waived. It was a bit of a mess to start, certainly over the first half of the season anyway. But then they released Dodson knowing that the next man up was going to be Knight. And I don't think he disappointed at all. Certainly not for a rookie, right? So from week 11 onwards, he was the clear number 2 behind Jones, earned an average 83% snap share over those final 8 games. And with the opportunity, he missed only 6 tackles or 6.7% of his efforts, handled himself pretty well in pass coverage, certainly for a rookie, and finished with a really nice 15.3% tackle efficiency rate, which ranked in the 86th percentile amongst all linebackers. Put simply, dude, I think we're in for more of the same. There's really nobody on the roster at linebacker to challenge him, and providing they don't move to more free safety looks, because they do have 2 good safeties already, or they did have 2 good safeties already before they took McGuire. I don't think there's going to be any change to what we saw toward the end of last year, and Knight should be heavily involved yet again. And I think the comfort of knowing that he has the same DC in Aiden Durd, and I have to give a shout out for flying the UK flag, Aiden. I think Knight has some pretty nice value in leagues that start 3 linebackers. All things considered, I think he's a pretty solid bet for a breakout. Yeah.
I love this call because Knight, I have him rostered on many places, not only for that reason, but he came into camp very motivated. He had some very lofty goals. And not only that, but he outperformed Ernest Jones in several games, not only in PFF metrics, but also like the stat column with tackles and things like that. So if you're getting a Tyrice Knight in rounds, as a linebacker 3-4, I would much rather invest in a player like that than taking Ernest Jones as my linebacker 1, so that it just, for the cost of entry alone, Tyrice Knight just screams breakout to me. So love that call.
Yeah. And he's always been, there is some danger that, we look at these tackle efficiency numbers and they might change from year to year. But as I said, same DC, and Knight was also a tackle monster in college. That final year especially, he was insane. I forget what the figures were exactly. Should have them up here in front of me. But yeah, he's kind of shown who he was. That was what everyone was saying about him when he came out. He just racks up tackles for fun, and we saw him do the same thing in his rookie year. And even if he doesn't improve as a player, the rest of those linebackers on that roster, they're not challenging him at all. He's going to do the same thing again this year.
And I like what you said too. Like, the rest of that roster doesn't scare you. They didn't, the team didn't draft anyone or bring in any free agents. So that kind of tells you that they're okay with what they've got. And as an IDP manager, I'm okay with that too, because then I know his role is going to be pretty safe, and I don't have to worry about, losing snap shares or like a 60-40 snap share with someone else. So this ideal situation to acquire a player who's definitely ascending, definitely on that breakout list for sure.
The Super Bowl is the biggest event in sports, but Jalen Carter makes big plays and very few fantasy gamers care. That's going to change with the D-Up contest on Fast Draft. You draft 6 defenders. The top 4 enter your lineup every week. You can draft up to 30 teams. There's a $10,000 prize pool. And if you love Aiden Hutchinson, you can get big exposure to that guy. And every time he's making plays for the Lions, you're making money. It's such an easy game to play. and it's so fun to sweat both sides of the ball on Sundays. Of all the fast draft contests, it's the D-up game that I think is going to really change how people play fantasy. Now use your host promo code to get a $50 deposit match when you deposit on Fast Draft. So, let's start drafting faster.
This player, I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a breakout player, because if you are on Twitter at all, his name is being screamed at the top of the hills right now, and that's rookie Carson Schwesinger from Cleveland. Like I said, he might not be a secret for very long, but Schwesinger is just might break the trend with rookie linebackers the last couple of years. I know that we've been bitten before with rookie linebackers, thinking they've fallen into ideal situations and kind of fallen on their faces and had us fall on our faces because we're kind of supporting them. But this just seems like a situation that you couldn't script any better. He was drafted literally the first pick of the second round, almost at the end of the first round. He's got a deal in size and speed for the position, 6'3", 225. If you go and look at his college stats from the last season, they're fantastic. 705 snaps, 100 tackles, 4 sacks, 2 interceptions. Literally any type of league that you play in, he can put up the stats that you kind of want. He's got zero competition for snaps right now that Jordan Hicks is retired. Devin Bush is facing some legal issues, potentially. Jerome Baker has been on like 13 different teams in the last 6 seasons. He doesn't scare me. I like the player of Mohamed Diabate, but I don't think he is going to be a player that's going to keep Schwesinger off the field. So those names don't scare me at all. He was rocking the green dot the other day in practice, and I know that a certain IDP manager who follows green dots and he happens to live in Cleveland is getting a little excited to see that. And so now there could be a little talk of a free agent coming in and taking a little shine off of his opportunity. But seeing what's on the market right now and seeing the buzz that Cleveland is putting around Schwesinger's name, I just don't see him losing all that much. And for a player that's a rookie, and I know I've been burned in the past by rookie linebackers before, but this just seems too good to be true. So.
Yeah. And you mentioned a certain IDP manager who happens to be a Browns fan who is super excited by him. And no surprise that it's Mike. But to give Mike his dues, and I know that you're not saying otherwise, he has no problem in criticizing certain Browns players too, right? When there's a linebacker guru like Mike, who I know pre-draft was also a big fan of Schwes, is talking him up to the extent that he is, then you know he's onto something, right? What's not to like about him? We were all high on him in the draft, weren't we? He's rangy, explosive. And just to be clear, I'm talking about Schwesinger here, not Mike. But maybe some of these descriptions also apply to Mike. He's rangy, explosive. But really, one of the most impressive things, at least to me, is considering he only started 1 year really at UCLA, is how he reads the game, his awareness that he has. It really separates him from most rookie linebackers. But you mentioned that landing spot. It was good to start with, but now it's great. Hicks is gone. Obviously, JOK is we don't know what the situation is there, but he's not playing for some time, if at all. And now as you say, we got Schwesinger in the dock. It just his stock has skyrocketed. I think, as you said, we always play it safe with rookie linebackers. We've been burned so many times in recent years. But this is one situation where I'm just going to ignore my own rule because he's just got too much working in his favor. I'm totally on board with this call, Jeff.
Do you feel like he's already broken out now? Because can his value really ascend more than where he's at right now? Because I think about where he was drafted in rookie drafts, if your league drafted in April or May, fast forward now to the end of July, beginning of August, how much higher can his value really go than it is right now? He hasn't even played a real NFL game yet.
Very true. And, there's a degree of, you have to build that into where you're taking him. But his range of outcomes, and certainly the upper end of that range is incredible, especially when you think about the potential that he has and the ceiling that he has. It's really hard to say. I don't have his current ADP in front of me. It'd be really interesting to see. I was frantically trying to bring it up there, kind of preempting your point in the July ADP risers and fallers, but I can't see him there at the moment. If anyone's listening to this, go and check it out on the IDP show, though, because it will be there. But I would be staggered if he wasn't one of the biggest risers over the course of the last few weeks. You've just got in there just in time, I reckon, Jeff, to call him a breakout candidate, because I think, you know, in just a few weeks' time, everyone would have caught up and he won't be considered such anymore. He'll just be a guy who's getting drafted really high, and expectations are sky high, but rightly so for all the reasons that you mentioned. Sky's the limit.
I know that doing these D-up drafts a couple weeks ago, he was a player that never was drafted. And in the last, probably 8 or 9 drafts that I've been a part of over the last couple of days, he's always going in that 5th, 6th round. So that's a top 60 player with mixed linemen, defensive backs, and linebackers. So you're thinking he's probably in that, drafted as a linebacker 3 right now at the high end there. So what's his ceiling? What do you think his range of outcomes is, Jase?
I mean, if he ended up as a high end LB2, I would not be in the slightest bit surprised. For that, what's the ingredients we look for? We're looking for a full-time guy. For first and foremost, that's by far the most important point. You know, as talented as he is, we see lots of guys who aren't so talented end up in that LB1 category almost year on year because they've got a full-time role. And then we look at the scheme as well. Lots of things go into the mix, but I'd be very surprised if he wasn't. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ended up as a high-end LB2. And I, based on what you've just said there about those D-ups, I'd be very surprised if anyone had taken him in that range. Absolute slam dunk as a breakout candidate, I think, Jeff, which is something big to say about these rookie guys, where we know and have learned we've got to be really cautious with. But then I was thinking back to some of the rookies that we were saying really encouraging things about last year, the junior Colsons. Even he, there was all that familiarity with Minter and with Harbaugh, and the Chargers linebacker competition being pretty wide open. But I, as a Chargers fan, I'd seen quite a lot of Henley and had quite high hopes for him, similar draft capital as Colson. So I was unsurprised to see Henley emerge from that group as the top dog. There was question marks over all of them. I think there's less question marks over Schwesinger than there is over some of the other guys who we were hyping at this time last year, who had similar draft capital, or maybe even slightly better, come to think of it.
Yeah, I know. And then one last thing here for Mike on him. He's calling him the Cleveland version of Luke Kuechly, like Cleveland Kuechly. So I think that's some pretty high praise from someone who loves linebackers, who loves Luke Kuechly, and might be starting to love Carson Schwesinger. So we'll let that play off for the next couple of weeks, and we'll see where we're at. So we'll come back. Yeah. We'll circle this one on the calendar. So transitioning now to the defensive backs, and I know that sometimes defensive backs don't get the love that they deserve, and they're a position that turns over year to year. So finding that breakout might be a little more challenging, just because your pool that you're selecting from is a little bit larger. So who's the player that you're kind of dipping your toes in here in August?
Yeah, I've gone with Cole Bishop, Bills safety. And he's, if I'm honest, Jeff, a bit of a harder sell than a lot of the others I could have gone with here, because his path to snaps isn't super clear right now. But the reason he's here is largely because the guys who stand in his path really shouldn't at all. You've got Damar Hamlin, who deserves all the credit. I've got great respect for him. What he did in terms of being able to get back on the field, that's the stuff of legend right there. And, all credit to him. But I'd love his story to finish with him playing so well that he couldn't be replaced, or that he was extended. But that's really not been the case, or at least it wasn't on the basis of what happened last year. He's a huge liability in pass coverage. And then there's Taylor Rapp, who is a much better run defender, but he was also terrible in coverage. From week 10 onwards, he had only one game with a PFF coverage grade above 58.1, allowed 2 touchdowns, had 4 straight games allowing more than a 100 passer rating, and 2 in a row allowing a perfect passer rating. And I think this is kind of where Bishop comes in. Now, I've got to be honest, he looked really poor when he did play last year, and we can't ignore that, right? But what we also can't ignore is that second round draft capital, pretty high for a safety, right? And the fact that the 2 guys ahead of him are crappy. One of whom, as I mentioned earlier on with Hamlin, is in a contract year. And then there's the comments from DC as well, Bobby Babich, he said some pretty negative things about Bishop last year. And when you fast forward to what he said in June of this year, almost a year apart, it's like night and day. He really kind of raved about his progress. So, as I said before, it's a bit of a risky call, at least riskier than some of the other games, the other guys we're talking about here. But I'm drawn towards, and if Mike can come up with monikers for these players, I'm going to call him Box Safety Bishop. To kind of capitalize on that run he got towards the end of last year, especially in the playoffs, which counts, right? He obviously earned their trust enough to be able to play during those playoffs, and maybe like elevate his game a little bit, earn a big role in this secondary and breakout in 2025. God knows the Bills, of all defenses, at least when they need defense most, need someone else to step up and become a playmaker for them, right? Because their recent playoff games have been brutal on defense.
Hearing that the playoff play of Bishop too, letting him play when the games matter most, that's been kind of a theme here lately with some of our players on this list, is they've been playing their most important games when they matter the most during the playoffs. So, a player like Nolan Smith got a lot of play during the playoffs. A player like Cole Bishop got some play right when the games matter most. I think that's kind of telling as far as their level of trust that the team has in them. And that, could very well lead into some very positive things heading into 2025 for these players. So I love that the draft capital is there. And like you said, a second round draft player for a safety position, that's amazing. That's really, really high. There's very few that go in the first round, if at all. And then, for the Bills to invest someone in Cole Bishop, a team that has historically had really good safety play, just to kind of continue that. So
yeah, and if I'm entirely honest, obviously they turned to him in the playoffs because they had to, because of injuries to others. But the fact that they were happy to turn to him when the game was on the line, when the Super Bowl run was on the line, then I think that still says something. They could have gone in a different direction. So, yeah, point still stands.
Well, like you said, maybe because the other players were crappy, and I think that was your quote. So I appreciate you keeping it a family show. So, well, staying in, yeah, I'll make a note of that. So, staying in the division, and like we said, the defensive back position is one of those players that you often can punt and take late. And this is a player I'm not advocating he's going to be flag plant. He's not going to be somebody you got to leave your draft with, but somebody just to monitor. It's going to be Marcus Jones of the New England Patriots. Player heading into his fourth season, so he's got a little seasoning to him. A former third round pick. I could have used some of my other defensive back targets that we mentioned this year, like Carlise, like we mentioned. I know you're a fan of him as well. Jordan Hicks, Will Harris, but wanted to do a little digging, like you had said, and I came across Jones. Excellent tackler, and he plays in that IDP sweet spot that we all love, the nickel slot corner spot. Played 586 snaps last season, super banged up at the end of last season. So kind of opposite of what we've been saying with some of these other players, how they're playing their best ball at the end of the season. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to. But if you dive into his weeks 1 through 12, he had amazing stats and a great tackler. He's been a perennial high-end tackler at the position in his 3 years in the NFL. Fully healthy, playing really well at camp. I love the soundbite that he had the other day. He told reporters that he's focusing on his role on defense and special teams, but when it's time to play offense, the coaches call his name. He's going to be ready to go. And this is the type of player that I really like leaving drafts with or having on the end of my bench as kind of that cheat code. Carlise is that player who's getting some defensive back eligibility in leagues, but he's playing linebacker. Cheat code. Well, now I can get Marcus Jones, and in a league that potentially could be a return yardage league, I want him because if he can get any extra points from return yards, from playing an offensive snap, from doing anything extra and above and beyond, playing his role on defense, sign me up. He's kind of like the Tamu version of Travis Hunter. He's not going to be the flashy name or anything like that. He's going to be very much a discount. He's only rostered in 50% of sleeper leagues right now. But if I can take him after I have my starters filled in at my DB5, DB6, I can easily move off him in week 2 when I can see what his role is going to be, and it costs me nothing. So if I can get a cheap code at that price, it's just too tempting.
Yeah, that sort of spot in drafts when you're thinking about taking him. What are your alternatives as well, right? You might as well shoot for the moon because you're not really losing out on a huge amount by taking someone like Jones over whoever else is going to be around that spot. I don't even need to look at the ADP to know that. But yeah, I'm really glad you brought him up because he's a player I haven't really talked about much this year, but I have him on a couple of rosters for all the reasons you pointed out. And with him, I still kind of find it funny that the reason he wasn't used on offense more to start last year, in addition to what they came out and said, Mayo said he's, they want him to focus on getting healthy and kind of focus on playing cornerback and return, was because the offensive coordinator, whose name I forget now, wasn't aware that Jones had experience playing in an offensive role, which I just love that storyline that came out last year. That said, you can bet Josh McDaniels knows about Jones's ability with the ball in his hands beyond just being a punt returner, right? We're talking about offense, and Jones made that point himself last week, and he kind of said that I'm expecting a sprinkling of offensive plays this year, and that McDaniels kind of is very much aware. I forget, I'm probably misquoting him here, but yeah, he's aware. He made it very clear that McDaniels is aware of the fact that he can play on offense. Will it be enough to push him into breakout territory? I really don't see why not, Jeff. Even as the slot corner, even if he's not playing full time, that slot usage is nice. The idea that offenses might throw his way more often because of Gonzalez is also nice. The threat that he might score points on offense, again, nice. I think he's got as good a shout as any other DB to be a breakout this year. So yes, I concur. I'm right there with you.
And to your point, Jase, it's for the players you're taking around him.
Mm-hmm.
Play for the home run. You're not going to be out. Most of the players you're going to be drafting at that spot in the draft are going to be on your waiver wires week 2, week 3 anyway. They're not going to be someone that you're counting on. And if you can hit a home run with Marcus Jones in the very end of your draft, your last pick in the draft, like your best ball, like why not? You're playing to win leagues. You're not playing to play in leagues. So that's my mentality anyway. So
absolutely.
So, well, we've gone through our defensive tackles, our defensive ends, our linebackers, and now our corners, our defensive backs. Now we've got our bonus round. So who's a player at any position, Jase, that you are kind of excited about being a breakout candidate for 2025?
Yeah, and I said earlier on that I had some fresh names for you. I saved my one exception for my bonus player, YaYa Diaby, Bucks edge. I debated over and over whether I wanted to talk about him again, as I've been banging the drum for him a lot this offseason. And for someone who really doesn't have many sort of my guys, the fact that I'm bringing him up again probably says a lot. But the numbers make him really hard to ignore as a breakout. Last year, finished 12th amongst all edges with a 14.6% pressure rate, which finished in the 93rd percentile. 24.1% win rate, ranked 9th, good enough for the 97th percentile. But the reason that I'm talking about him as a 2025 breakout is because despite having 65 pressures, really good amount, right, Jeff, only finished with 4.5 sacks. So we're back to talking about that, sack normalization, positive sack regression, to use the term that Mr. Macri loves so much. And in that sense, Diaby is due a lot more sacks in 2025 if he can keep bringing the pressure. And why wouldn't he? Tryon Shiinka has gone. Yes, Reddick is there now, but it's surely going to be, I think, the Reddick and Diaby show. Anthony Nelson isn't it. Chris Braswell might be in time, but he's nowhere near Diaby's level yet. So I'm tripling down on my prediction that Diaby is going to be a double-digit sack guy this year. And if he doesn't, I think he'll at least get close.
I really like this call because you have a player who has opportunity. He's got the metrics to be there, and all it takes is just a little more luck from one season to the next to turn those pressures into hits and sacks. And if there's anything that I have learned from IDP is don't chase last year's stats, because interceptions, really hard stat to repeat. Sacks, a really hard stat to repeat. But what isn't hard to repeat is if you're a good player, you have a win rate, you're applying pressure, those types of things are more repeatable. And I think a player like Diaby, who is in a great situation with opportunity, added snaps, he's going to be a fantastic candidate to be you heard it here first, double-digit sack guy. That's what he quoting you right now. So, oh no, it's out there.
He's a weird one,
right?
He
looks like a genius now when it happens.
He had so few pressures in his rookie year and had sort of 8.5, 9 sacks, and then more than doubled the pressures last year and had less than half the sacks. These exceptions happen. It's really rare they happen back to back in consecutive seasons, but yeah, third year is a charm. I think he's going to keep bringing the pressure. As I said, very little competition at that edge spot. And yeah, I really rate him as a player. I think one of those few players that I don't know if I just catch all of his best plays. I watch a lot of football, but every time I watch him, he looks disruptive and dangerous. And like I said, I can't see any reason why his snap share, his involvement would decrease this year, even with a more capable partner on the opposite edge in Reddick.
Yeah, I just think there's no reason that's not in the realm of possibilities for the season for Diaby. So Jase is saying yeah to YaYa Diaby. So
I am.
Yeah, all right. All right, last player here. I know I'm not going to get myself sucked into the rookie linebackers, but here I am getting sucked into the rookie linebackers. It's Jihaad Campbell. It's hard not to get hyped about a player like this. He went in the first round draft capital. He's playing with a team that's got a ton of talent. So again, offensive coordinators can't scheme up to take him out of the plays. Even at a position, he might not even be the best linebacker on his team. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for him. He's going to be able to take his time and learn. He's not going to be the pressure of being the guy on his team isn't going to be there for him. Way ahead of schedule with a shoulder injury. He's making plays in camp already. We were thinking that he was going to be weeks into the preseason before we even saw him get on the practice field. He was out there day one. He's making the camp and beat writers drooling with his speed and twitchiness. He's just a fun player to watch. In just 12 college games last year, he played 735 snaps. He had 7 sacks, 102 tackles, an INT, and 2 pass breakups. He does have some competition with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Nakobe Dean, but Trotter is a 5th-round pick. And I think he's more of a legacy pick for the Eagles than he is like a surefire starter. And Nakobe Dean hasn't been the ideal picture of health. He got injured last year in the playoffs, so it's going to be a couple months before he even starts to get ready for Sunday shape. Guessing that slow start to the season for Campbell as he splits time with Trotter. But I think by week 4, Fangio is going to figure it out, and he's going to want his best players out there. And I think Campbell's going to be out there thriving for us. So.
Yeah, we're kind of aligned with, I think, on this one as well, Jeff. Which I'm looking for reasons to doubt myself, because to champion 2 rookie linebackers in the same season is dangerous ground, and there's something to be said and some confidence to be gained in the fact that I'm looking for reasons to doubt it, and still arriving at the same conclusion that you are, in that I think that he's due a good year. He was he's actually my rookie linebacker 1 ahead of Schwesinger. And part of the reason for that was I really liked the demonstrable progression that he showed each year throughout college. He's got the size, the length that we covered, good instincts as well, obviously. And I've been saying for a while that he's been better. He's better against the pass than he gets credit for. A lot was obviously made about his versatility, pass rusher, off-ball linebacker. I always saw him as an off-ball guy, even after getting drafted by the Eagles, who, as we said earlier on, have got at least a less experienced, potentially weaker edge group than they had this time last year. Been taking reps with the ones, as you said, turning heads, as you said, and I know Trotter's seen some time with the first team too, but I'd be really surprised if Campbell wasn't the main guy behind Bourne fairly early on, like you, if not from the outset, actually. Dean is obviously the bigger threat, played well until he got injured, but we don't know what his timeline is right now, and that was okay. It was okay to say that when we were back in sort of June, maybe early July, but we're on the precipice of the NFL season right now, and to still not quite know what his timeline is it kind of says to me that, and this is something I wrote in an article, I think after he got drafted, that I think Campbell's going to make the job his own way before Dean gets back. And with Dean in the contract year, it just makes a lot of sense to me that they'll just keep Campbell out there. Trotter, I thought actually played pretty well last year, but he was all over the place. He looked great one game and really poor the next. But Campbell, we're talking about Campbell here. He's got the draft capital, the talent, the potential, the upside that Trotter never really had. So it would be a massive surprise if he weren't the other linebacker, the other full-time linebacker behind Bourne fairly early into the season for me.
If we're playing devil's advocate here, are you concerned about his usage kind of being a Micah Parsons role where he's not going to be playing like a true linebacker, but he's going to be more hands in the dirt? Like Parsons is a great NFL player, but maybe not so much as a fantasy linebacker. Now, if you can use him as a defensive lineman, that's totally a different story. But Campbell doesn't have that eligibility right now in any format. He's a straight linebacker. So does he lose a little luster because of the potential role he might play in that defense for you, Jase, or no?
No, not at all. As I say, I always viewed him as an off-ball linebacker who can rush the passer well, depending on the scheme that he landed in. The Caden Ellis types. Maybe that was his in his sort of range of outcomes, in his sort of possible outcomes. But I always saw him as an off-ball guy, and maybe that's partly because I saw him as a better coverage defender than other people seemed to. But yeah, I think it would take a really poor showing from the likes of Hunt and maybe Smith for them to try and experiment with putting Campbell out on the edge more than I'm thinking they will. So yeah, no, not at all. I'm not worried about that.
Oh, good. You just helped me sleep like a baby tonight, thinking that Campbell's linebacker role and efficiency is going to be safe. So, all right.
That's a lot of pressure.
Jase, we got to the end. Yeah, we got to the end of our list here. So any final thoughts as we kind of wrap up this episode, and anything you'd like to share to the listeners about what you're currently working on right now?
No real final thoughts. I talk plenty during my sort of player explanations, so I think I've said everything I need to say in that sense. Yeah, really, Jeff, just thanks very much for having me on. I've been looking forward to coming on. I love talking breakouts. It is one of the most fun topics to do. Perfect time to be doing it as well, I think, armed with all the latest info right before the preseason starts, right? So yeah, it's just been an absolute blast getting to do this. One of my favorite topics with of course one of my favorite IDP people. So yeah, loved it.
Cutting onions over here. Well, like I said before, I appreciate all the work that you do and did to make the platform what it is, and just keep smashing it, dude. You're one of the great reads out there. You got some great takes and things like that. So, and I appreciate every time I get an opportunity to talk life or football with you. So I hope you keep coming back.
Likewise. And yeah, you can't keep me away, Jeff. I'll be back for sure. Whether you want me or not, I'm just going to pop up on a random show that you're doing as a third guest in the middle of your show.
That's all right. Anytime. Anytime. You can be my third wheel. You can be the third wheel on my dates anytime, Jase. So.
But yeah, as you asked, yeah, I'm spreading myself a little thinly this year. Not as thinly as in years past. Going to be putting together some in-season fantasy articles here with the IDP show. Similar story over at DLF as well, albeit with sort of kind of like more of a focus on dynasty content. I'll also have my rankings over there as well. And new to this year, I'm going to be writing a lot of NFL content for DAZN here in the UK too. So yeah, got a lot on, but I can't wait to get going.
Is the non-American market for football just continuing to grow exponentially? Jase, do you see that happening?
Yeah. You've only got to look at the attendance figures for the London games, and the NFL is doing such a good job of expanding its global reach to so many new markets. We got a game not far from here, or nearer to my wife's sort of homeland, over in Dublin this year for the first time. The Vikings and the Steelers, which I'm hoping to go to still. Although I was 600,000 in the queue when I looked last, and it has a capacity of, I think, reduced capacity of about 73,000. So yeah, maybe that answers your question. It's it's big over here. Very different experience to watching games in the States, where you have fans of all teams attending the stadium, as opposed to just a huge swathe of one team. But yeah, it's big over here. Clearly not as big as it is over there, but continuing to grow for sure.
As a fan of football, it's hard not to get like, I don't want to say like emotional about it, but like seeing the London games or the games overseas and seeing like every jersey in the stands, not just like one color or the other opposing team's color, but every color of jersey there is. And then like having Country Road being sung by like thousands and thousands of people in the stands, like into the commercial break. It's just pretty fun to see and hear. So
yeah, there's a lot of passionate people here, and I think more knowledgeable than they get credit for, I think, on the whole. Maybe it's just the circles that I move in with a lot of my friends. I play in a couple of different home leagues over here. Yeah, people know their stuff. They've been following this for a long time. And yeah, the market's there. I can definitely see why the NFL are doing it, and believe me, it's not wasted. At the same time, I do appreciate the difficulties involved in people from the States and certainly players from the States making the hike over here. But believe me, we are very grateful. That's for sure.
Well, I have to give it to you, Jase, because being a North American sports football fan, basketball fan, whatever fan, and you're in a different country, the dedication and sacrifices you guys make to watch or attend a game, because all hours of the day, I know that like last year we were on a trip to Australia and it was during the NBA finals, and it was like 9:00 on a Wednesday morning, and like the equivalent to like what an American Buffalo Wild Wings would be was packed with people eating, drinking, cheering on the basketball, the NBA finals. And I was just like, it's 9:00 on a Wednesday morning, but that's the willingness and the sacrifices that, fans have to make, that we're almost spoiled here in the States. We often think about like, oh, it's so hard to get to a game and stadium and all that kind of stuff. But like, hey, if you're out there at 9:00 on a Wednesday morning, pouring them back, like more power to you. So.
Yeah, I can't say I pull them back at 9, but yeah, 4:30 a.m. finish is a regular occurrence. And yeah, I'm not sure my boss sees it quite the same way when I roll into work looking bleary-eyed and broken 2 or 3 times a week, but it is what it is. So yeah, that's the decision we make, right? That's the choices we make. And yeah, no regrets whatsoever. It's just an awesome sport, isn't it?
Yeah, appreciate that. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the IDP After Show. Jase, I want to thank you again for coming on and talking some football about some of your favorite players looking to break out in 2025. Next time, I'll be joined by Mr. Cornerback himself, Johnny the Greek, and he's going to be bringing along a special guest to help put a ribbon on our divisional preview episodes with the AFC and the NFC East. To make sure you don't miss that or any of the other outstanding episodes on the IDP After Show or the IDP Show, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification so you'll always know when something new gets dropped. If you like this episode, make sure you hit that thumbs up button so we know what types of content to keep rolling out to you, our valued listeners. For Jase, I'm Jeff. We say thank you for listening, and we look forward to sharing some more IDP content with you next time.